So if you need to create a template, go File, Save As. Should then bring up this window. So I'm not sure why it doesn't have the window. The view you saw, that's very old AutoCAD, like before they had windows showing up. So I'll figure out what you want in there. Go to the file type. Right now everything saves to .dwg. The other option is DXF. And then the last option that we are typically working with is .dwt. There's something called standards, but we're not going to touch on that right now. So .dwt template will typically just default you right to the template folder, but you can save this anywhere. So for example here, let's call this gripper table. So right now I'm editing the template within the gripper table.
So how to break down.
So what we can do, I'm just going to quickly do something here. So let's call this pad like that. Call this cylinder body. Let's go with that. Leave that and cylinder shaft. So I just saved this. This is now my gripper table. Close that. Start a new drawing. Oh, don't click on that one. Sorry, wrong one. Start a new drawing. Up here, it'll then bring up a template you need to start with. So most of these are just blank. Some actually do have some things already built into them. But for example, if I were to start a blank AutoCAD, the one that we've mostly been using, it has nothing in here, right? Go to Insert, there are no blocks created. So the whole idea is, if you were doing another gripper table, if I were to go to my block, sorry, my template I've already created, right here, it'll bring up whatever you've saved in here, including all the blocks you've already created. So you go ahead and quickly reassemble. Everything I created before. And I had a little question online here. So just to reiterate what the two different coordinate systems that we are working on in AutoCAD are. One is, let's see, where do you go? One is the absolute entry, and the other one is relative. So difference again is if I were to just click right now with my polar coordinate, my polar tracking turned on, click wherever I want to click relative to my start point. So I can either just click somewhere, start entering something, let's say 40 at 45 degrees. Everything is always relative to the last point. The other way of entering information is absolute. So if I start a line again, turn on the pound sign, my first point, let's say, let's go 20 by 25. It starts at the exact location 20 by 25. And let's say I want to go back to 0, 0. Again, pound 0, comma 0. It will bring me back to exactly 0, 0. So those are the two different ways of entering coordinates. There's relative, and then there's absolute. Does anyone understand that? And just in case anyone missed it, just remember there are 4 different quadrants. They're kind of imaginary right now just because it all looks like one giant model space. But right at 0, 0, actually I'm going to draw this. So if I were to draw a line starting at 0, 0, and we're to draw 100 out, so 100 in the positive x direction, this way. Draw another one at 0, 0, but up 100, so 0, 100, and negative 100, 0, and 0, minus 100. Those are my 4 quadrants. So quadrant 1, oh, really small. One, 2, 3, 4. Those are my 4 different quadrants. So in this quadrant, it will be positive x, positive y. This quadrant will be negative x, positive y. And then this quadrant will be negative x, negative y. And lastly, positive x and negative y. Does that make sense for everyone? And then also, I haven't had to play around with it too much, but remember that the direction of rotation in AutoCAD is positive in the counterclockwise direction. So let's say I were to just draw a line out here. If I were to rotate from this base point here, and let's say I go 90 degrees positive, it will go that way. If I go 90 degrees negative, it goes back clockwise. So right now we've mostly just been living in quadrant 1 and just moving everything relative, but in the event you need to have absolute entries as well as directional rotational entries. Just remember which way your positives and negatives are. So let's do something like that.
第一个点的坐标0.0，这个力的坐标就是说，其实这原点开始如果你从右边拉，实际上就是把它打开，首先进100、1000，对吧？它现在等于锁定是0度了，对吧 ？OK， 再来一条，选这个点沿着往下，随便随便一点，对吧？2000，好了，如果是OK， 我们再还是一个圆盘，这个还是一个随机的后边，如果是300，最后300，你就从300为起点，这是起点。现在我们这个时候呢，如果我要去，
So this is a menu buried pretty deep within AutoCAD, but if you type in draft D settings, it'll bring up your drafting settings. The other way to get there, all right, it's under options, and drafting, nope, it's not in there. Oh, where's the other way to go? There's another way to go, but D settings is the keyboard way. I'll see where I can find the other way of getting here. If you scroll over on the top, so scroll the ribbons over until you see something called dynamic input. Within the pointer input, under settings there, typically we work within polar because we're usually designing based off relative coordinates. But if for some reason you need to have it so that your base coordinate entry is no longer polar but Cartesian, so that's the absolute entry, you can change that right here, absolute coordinates, and they have Cartesian format as well. So with that,
x 的和 y 轴的距离是100跟100 x 就是横线100。
oh, that is not working right now.
是跟这点相对的，
This, there we go.
这点相对的。
So 40,
就绝对的。
Let me change that polar format, absolute coordinates, there we go. This should be better, so 40. There we go. So I'm going to go 40. That will start me 40. Starts me at 40. And my next entry, 50, will bring me to the absolute coordinate of 50. Now let's say I've done this, and instead of an absolute entry, I want to go back to the relative entry. I use the @ symbol, and it brings up my relative again. So I can go 10 at 0. It can then draw a relative line 10 in the x at a certain degree, or 5. Oops. Right, I'm still in absolute. So @ sign 5, comma, -5. There we go. So I was in absolute entry. I started the line here, and typically, if I were to type 5 - 5, it would shoot me down to the absolute entry of 5 minus 5. But if I go back to that same point and I enter the @ sign, I type in 5, comma, minus 5. That's the biggest difference between relative and absolute. So be careful if you are playing around those settings. They're kind of buried deep, so you have to be typically intentionally changing this. So D settings, under dynamic input, under settings on the pointer input, there's the option of changing relative and absolute as your primary coordinate entry. You have to use comma. You have to use comma after that. So there you go. Now take it. Yeah.
It's 300. And then if I do tab, it would just go to end, right?
Yeah.
So what should I do? Comma.
Yeah. So before you tab over, so 300, and at the very end, type comma. Now enter. Yeah. So really careful on your keyboard entry, guys. There was a good question here, how you can switch X and Y coordinate entries while you're trying to do an absolute entry. So I can turn on my absolute entry by pressing Shift 3 to turn on pound. So let's say I want to go to 10 minus 20. Those of you online can't really see this, but what I'm typing is 10, and I'm pressing the comma key. Do you see how that's locked the X direction now? There's a little lock symbol beside the 10. It's now allowing me to enter the absolute Y coordinate. So let's go minus 20. So it will bring me down to exactly 10 minus 20. That's my endpoint. So very important that you're entering the keys in the right order. Again, I can choose my first point wherever I want, or this is where you actually are entering an absolute coordinate, even though we're in relative coordinate entries. The very, very first time you're typing something, this is actually the time to type in an absolute coordinate. So if I want to go minus 10, comma, minus 10, it will start me in that negative coordinate. And then let's say we want to go positive. Now it'll ask me 10. Sorry, let's go pound, 10, comma, 10. It'll bring me to the exact location, the absolute entry. So the order of how you're entering things on the keyboard does play a big part in this. You do have to be careful how you're doing it. So go ahead, zoom out a little bit, and start playing around with that a little bit. Actually, this is a nice time to talk about it. We've typically just been using our mouse scroll, the middle mouse button to scroll around. If for some reason you don't have that, you actually have to go back to the old AutoCAD commands. So if you need to zoom away, you can type the letter Z, and it actually gives you different options. Typically, you either want to go to Extents or All, and that will actually zoom you out to everything that's within your model space. just in case your mouse button doesn't work, or you just want to see everything that's within your model, because I think I mentioned this in a past class, just in case you had a little something that was drawn way out there, and you just want to make sure your model space is clean. If you type in the letter Z and E, it'll zoom you out until you see absolutely everything, including this little line that was off in the middle of nowhere. So Z, E is pretty much the most common keyboard zoom command you'll use. And if for some reason you don't have that middle scroll button on your mouse, you can also pan the very old way by typing P, and then you've got a little hand you can hold by left clicking and holding and dragging your space around. Again, we haven't had to really move around our space that much. We've typically stayed all within our first quadrant and zoomed in and out. But in the event you need to, there are the classic commands of AutoCAD. They have not taken those away. There's also other options in here. Since we're covering this, we can even do things like a zoom window. So if you want to zoom in on a very specific part, by left clicking and left clicking again, I can have a zoom window. So it fills in that exact window I drew out. Again, if I'm zoomed out, Z, W, I can choose the exact area I want to zoom into, and it zooms me right in. There's lots of other ones you can play around with. These are all classic AutoCAD commands made for computers before there was even a scroll button. So you have to remember this is dating back to the 80s of AutoCAD. So AutoCAD R10 and single digit AutoCAD numbers, well before they ever discovered or invented a scroll wheel on your mouse. But feel free to play around with the classic buttons and the classic commands, just so you have an understanding of it and an appreciation for that scroll wheel. Employees.
That's benefit for the public college.
Is there anything you guys want to review today, or anything that is, not fully understood? Anything you guys want to elaborate further on? I want to make sure you guys are pretty comfortable with the stuff we've been covering. We're getting more into like the fine detail commands of sort of what's left as far as AutoCAD has. So anything that you guys had a little bit of trouble with or didn't fully understand,
举个例子啊，
good time to start bringing that stuff up. So again, like I said, we want to start getting you guys ready for that certification. So whether it's today or the remaining half of this course, message Woody, let him know things that you guys want covered. This includes our online group. Please message or email Woody. Let him know things that you guys want covered more specifically, so we can tailor this last half of the class. Sorry, not today's class, but last half of the program for you guys. And I am going to double check a few details within that certification, just to make sure you guys are well prepared as far as we've covered everything and that we're not missing anything. But anything that we have already covered up to this point and perhaps you're not fully understanding, there's no problem in recovering it. Just like blocks today, even though we spent a fair bit of time on blocks, there's always those little finer details that are really good to go over. If it can help you guys understand the program that much more, we're happy to go over it.
这样选了一个中心点，也就中心点为高度，就是越高你看的东西的越多，越矮看的东西越少。也就是79178，按个1万出10万出10，越高你看的东西越多，对不对？这样的一个。
Freezing was when we were using viewports. Do you remember how to show it?
甚至是。
The viewport control though is the freezing of layers, the freezing and unfreezing. The locking. I'm trying to remember what the locking does.
一般情况下，我们找东西就按照一个。
Need to double check what the locking is. I don't use that one too often. The locking protects the layer, so you don't modify it by accident.
很远，或者你东西突然找不到了，不小心按的时候放得很大，就把它最快把它找出来。P 是平移，平移。
他说也可以用来这个
一般拼 AN 只是平移，没有什么用专有，有什么用的话直接就平移，它不会放大也不会放小。如果你按这个小键呢，它只能往右移。是不是还是按键？对，只能往右往上往下，它不能斜的移。按小键是垂直跟转。
在这个 layer 里，这个 layer 不能直接在这儿写，比如说在这儿让我直接写这个。如果我想让一个图层不显示，就直接在这点开两个，是吧？这个。
So I have to remind myself a little bit later, the actual purpose of locking the layer. It doesn't do a lot, except when you hover over something that's locked, it will literally have a little lock symbol on it. You can see there. As far as purpose, do you remember what locking is good for? If we need to lock down a layer, like I never really used it.
I never used it.
Yeah. There's reasons for that stuff.
Actually, because the menu the most important thing in CD is when you draw something in the viewport, you don't want to use it in that, or you don't want to see it in that viewport. Just close it.
Yeah. Okay, but so just the question that we had asked, I had someone had asked here in the class was, what do you do with the freeze function? So within a viewport, as you can see, I can freeze or thaw something. So I have now frozen my test layer. So everything that was on the test layer is now gone. But if I go back to my model space, oh, actually, that didn't work as it was supposed to. There we go. Okay. Let me try that again. So within my okay, that's not supposed to happen. There, sorry, wrong one. So using the global. So within this one, the freeze or thaw in current viewport. There we go. So there we go. So within my viewport that I've selected specifically, if I freeze that layer, it will still remain in my model space. So that was the intention of, let's say I want to do a detailed drawing of just this. So I've got my viewport and I just wanted a detail of this only. Then instead of actually trying to delete or hide the layers, you just freeze that layer within this one viewport. Because then you can actually still create another viewport. See, that's a brand new viewport. It's all in here still. So if I was to create a new layout, sure. Where's my viewport? There. So that will show up because it's a brand new viewport. Whereas if I go back to this one, I've frozen it on that layer, or this viewport, that layer is not going to show up. So that was essentially being able to hide things to the point where you can isolate specific things in a view. And that's when you can have 50 different layers at that point if you're really building a very extensive list, and play with turning on and off all your viewport, freezing and thawing all of your viewport layers, just to finally create the view that you want to isolate. So you can make it a very complex model and keep everything in one model, but still have the ability to hide and.
I'll tell you one more thing here.
Yeah.
If somebody didn't show this menu here,
yeah,
you have to go to the viewport property here.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe somebody don't know get this menu, so I have to go to the viewport property.
Yeah.
In this viewport,
yeah,
that click layer, that input layer.
Like you want to show.
No, just double the inside double.
Yeah.
Then move. No. Here. Oh, yeah.
It's kind of.
No, I will be using here.
Oh, yeah. For some reason, I don't know why this.
Okay, so you can see every layer here.
Yeah.
Then which layer will be shown in this viewport or not shown in that viewport.
Right.
If you don't want to see this laser in this viewport,
Yeah.
find the viewport, find the laser's name, and close it.
Yeah, I haven't been able to demonstrate this stuff too much because mine keeps
Actually,
breaking. I
always
don't know why.
This one because if something you don't want to print,
Mhm.
so then you can close the viewport, then don't print that.
Yeah. Does that explain it?
几十的是那个时间。先保持热上，要是那是，这个应该，
还有谁？
对呀，大家不是要马上，你选嘛，没选那边。
但是我不是要画这样子。
对啊，你是这个是，你歪了。
不是，我是说。
Yeah, she press the mouse down or press the keyboard down, and then she gives you a list. So if you go forget it again. Oh, you can do that too, but if you close for a second, close edit.
This one?
So deselect everything, hit the edit. Number right.
This will be a minor file first.
Press the arrow key down. Should give you a list.
这个是具体一点，对不对？你是想随便的，
就是往这一点。
往上
What should I do?
往上是啊，
往上第10，还是所谓的这个
It does show the name though.
There it is. Yeah.
But it doesn't allow me to do anything.
可以给你选。
Just list it and then you can do the edit. Those are the old keyboard cats.
它必须有一个
They don't really get rid of them. Like
线的，
something that's so legacy.
它不会从线上找任何一个点。
And if they get rid of it, but someone had a customized script,
它会找
it breaks it. So like they're very careful about how they change the program.
That's kind of good. Something else.
It gets really complicated the more customized you make these programs because it's not just AutoCAD, it's Venture, it's SolidWorks. There's whole third-party programs that run based off the internal code of the software. I know the government has, or used to have, on the agriculture side, they had a script that lets you actually draw an area. And once you have your area drawn, we ran a post program that calculated areas.
Okay.
So no matter how complicated your lake shape was and things like that, I think there's a new way to do it with an AutoCAD, but previously it didn't have this. It had this customized program that figured out area of like grid shapes. So that was more civil work, but very useful because the government was splitting up parcels of land and lakes and different things that changed the actual land that you own. Let's say someone wants to own all land by this lake shape or something, they would parcel off that section of land and they'd be able to calculate it. Yeah, AutoCAD's quite a powerful way to use it.
5点中间应该有几个点？如果把那人家把它分开5段，中间应该有几个点？对，你看这里有4个点，是不是？
Are you guys getting too cold on this side? Okay.
但是他现在跟你说是那个突破那个创新个人
我想把这个字封了。
看看 skill
然后在这里我看你可以在这里选。
是可以啊，这里都可以啊，那个 SC 也可以啊。
现在我不是特别会那个dimension，就是标 dimension，就比如说在只建一个 report，我应该
report 是必须在你那个 paper space 里。
比如说我这已经有一个，就这个，我要标它的 dimension。
对啊，对，他们必须在对方外面标的，不是在里面标的。这样标就可以了。这样标，这个意思。
TLI 是什么？对。
直线标出来。这个命令一模一样的，线性标出来，跟命令是一模一样的。
但如果我想改这里的箭头和这个字体的大小颜色，
点一下就可以修改了，光改这一个。那个文字高度是3.5，箭头然后离那个线是1.5，箭头的大小这里有了2.5，这你是不是可以改的？指纹就可以改。一般情况下我们会。
Something we also haven't touched on too much, but we might as well kind of touch on it today since we're kind of going over all the little different standards and things. There's been a couple ways where you can edit the text where you can actually go ahead and modify the size right in there under the text editor. So that's good for just quickly modifying, blocks of text. Now, if you have a set standard, you actually have to modify on this drop down. So under annotate on your ribbon, click on the standard, brings you up a couple different options here. So under manage text styles, it will bring up your entire style editor. Within here, you can actually create new styles. So let's call this the EHTC style 1. Let's call this Calibri. Let's go with a height of 15. And I just want to make sure I've set this as current. So you can click set current just to make sure that that's what I'm going to be entering things as. You can then go and draw multi-line. You can see that that is actually the style that I just set. This allows me to go in and still modify things as I want. So once you're within the editor, you can still swap between styles. This is very much kind of like Word. So if you look at the new versions of Word, you can create lots of different text styles. This is very similar to that type of editing. So again, that's under the Annotate ribbon. On the drop down, you can go to Manage Text Styles. As you can see, if I need to change everything to that new style, I just pick the different blocks. I choose it on the drop down because I've chosen that I've already preset this EHTC style 1, and it changes everything that's selected. And that's how that works. So again, typically, once you have a standard setup, usually there's going to be set sizes, set fonts, things that you want to have consistent within your drafting standards. That's when you or your company will have set up a certain style. And you can do all sorts of effects. Let's see, where was that? It's not letting me do that. It should be showing up backwards and upside down, but something's not working on it. Maybe I can't do it on that one. Let's try Arial. That's not working. Oh well. Let's see why that's not going. While you guys are playing around with your different layers and things like that, I think you also try out something called match layer. So there's the one method of taking whatever you want to have modified, changing it directly on your layer dropdown. But they also have this other alternate way of doing it called match layer. You choose all the different things you want to have changed, space or right click, and then choose the type of layer you want it to switch to. So this was all on layer 0. I then want to make it onto this test layer, which is blue. So I just chose one that was already existing in that layer. And I just went and matched it. And then the make current one is if you go ahead and pick a layer that you're working with, you can make it current, and that's going to be the layer you're working in. So let's say if there were lots and lots of layers in here, you didn't want to go search through, but you just want to start drawing everything within this current layer. I click make current because right now I was in layer 0, but I have this selected, make current, and then now anything that I draw is going to be on that selected layer. So while you guys were kind of playing around with freezing and thawing of layers, feel free to play with that function as well.
就把这个线所在的图腾变为当前图腾。
当前图腾是什么图腾？
当前图腾就是譬如你现在你看，现在图腾是0，对不对？图腾是0，那么这里所有画的东西全部在0图腾下面，对不对？好了，这个条线的图腾是7，我们看了。那么呢，你现在所有图腾都图腾7下面。
就是你重新画的是？
对，好了，现在是0，我再把它们看了，这条线所在的图腾是0，没看了。好了，现在图腾0变为当前图腾了，对不对？然后再一个，
画就是
这个图腾是AM-3，我都没看了。好了，这个图腾当前图腾所有的画图图呢，在图腾3下面所有的东西，对不对？就这个意思。因为图腾在你画图当中呢，将来你画图的时候，不同的公式、不同的标准，但是你自己一想你怎么给你画图，怎么快，怎么方便，怎么修改方便，是完全是你自己去设定的，完全是你自己将来。
We need to cover in this.
So what are you going to show to the class? What are you going to show to the class?
Pretty much covered all the key things. It's just now about depth. This will be the next class, but I need to see how deep into each of these options you need to understand. We covered all the basics, but
normally here. We normally type do like this. Here standard. We have the new one. Then the new style. Start with standard.
Oh yeah.
Continue. Then make a new one.
Yeah.
And maybe it's new, but you can change it here. Then give it maybe and name the dimension style. And set color and make it the color style. Then we paste dimension from here.
Yeah. I just want to make sure we're covering everything here. Question? No. What am I missing? Oops. Oh, yeah, I should play this at some point. ISO drawings.
ISO.
Yeah.
建的字母多了。说你建的字母是你自己建的吗？可以用标记描述。
不是，他自己说，他自己就
另外的方向，有等一下的standard new， 它会让你建立一个新的那个口径 ，new standard new， 这个标记 standard continue， 然后呢就把这改完了以后呢就会产生一个新的，比如改这个，continue prime unit， 但是呢改了这个，全部改了，这个。OK， 建立一个新的那个下看人呢，就所有的标注模式就会在这个新建的标注模式去标注。新的标注模式。将来那个标注模式是基本上把它定下来，就是箭头是多小，那个文字是多大，全部都会自己定一个标准。
Okay, this is going to be something we're going to start attempting next class because I'm going to need to prep some grid paper for you guys here in class. For the people online, I might get you guys to either print off or purchase some grid paper. I'll let you know what to do before next class. We're going to start playing with isometric drawings. So I'm just kind of drawing out a really quick one here right now, as you can see, just so we had a basic view of it. Let's finish this up. Let's see. Okay, close. This definitely is not as common in AutoCAD to be creating 3D views, but it is possible still. So we'll kind of go over how all of that works in here. Yeah, we'll cover that next class. We won't get too much into on this one. I don't want to start anything too deep right now at the end of this class. Is there anything else you guys want to cover or review from the past? Any like old commands, even going back to like week 1? Is there anyone that wants to go over the old circle commands, different arcs, polys? This is time to kind of review all that stuff before we're getting, like I said, to that sort of nearing end of this. We're already past halfway through this program, so we're now going to be getting more into just prepping you guys for that certification and fine-tuning the major commands you guys have already learned. So want to make sure we're not missing anything. Like, I don't want to make it feel like you guys have, you know, seen it once and that's all we're going to cover it. That's why I want to kind of go back to those older things here, just so that we're really comfortable. So if there's anything you guys want to cover on that right now, this would be a good time to do it.
So is it very frequent to use AutoCAD to draw like something like a 3D?
Not that often. It's very
the engine, the rotor, like you show like using like in last weekend, that kind of drawing.
Yes. Okay, so something like that. There are times when it's drawn in AutoCAD, but actually sometimes those kind of drawings are actually done in a 3D program and then exported into AutoCAD for people to use for layout purposes and things like that. Because sometimes in 3D, you actually need to have a lot of things set up before you can even start using it for layout purposes. So that's where AutoCAD has that benefit. It can do things very quickly. It might not be quite as perfect in the sense of 3D programs out there actually have ways of detecting collisions in 3D space. So that little example we were doing with the gripper, you can spin this around and you can get it close. So let's see, do I have one saved with? I don't think I have one saved right now, but you can actually have it so you can use reference angles and see if things are going to collide visually, but there's no true detection. With some 3D programs up there, you can actually have it run a sequence and actually see if there's any collisions within the whole model. So this could be actually a full moving arm. You set it to a set of degrees, and you can actually run something and it'll tell you if there's a collision or not. Whereas AutoCAD, you have that ability, but it's not automated. You have to visually zoom in and see if there's a collision, right? So that's sort of where you won't use 3D a lot in AutoCAD for that reason. There's better programs better suited for those type of purposes, but just for representation, yeah, sometimes things are done in 3D in AutoCAD. There are times. Since we have a little bit of time right now, we can even just go through a couple neat things. We don't get too much of it into this course. From what I understand, it's not, I've never seen it required on your certification, but there are 3D capabilities to a degree in AutoCAD. So this is an AutoCAD layout that someone has done. It's just a standard actually AutoCAD file from Autodesk, but it is a full condo, and this is all done in AutoCAD with different layers. And I have seen some people do this within companies as well. They have visualized an entire building within AutoCAD. So and definitely AutoCAD's come a long ways from the past where you didn't quite have this type of control, but things have gone a lot better. They've continued to develop AutoCAD, so if you guys want to see it just for fun, I will drop it into the training folder. It's called Visualization Condominium with Skylight, and for those of us on the online group, I'm also going to upload this as well for your benefit. This is sort of a demonstration of not quite 3D in the sense of a true 3D program, but it does have 3D representation still nonetheless. So you can play around, zoom around in the space, and just sort of see how you can use AutoCAD for 3D. It is possible. There's also certain crossovers between AutoCAD and the other Autodesk product called Revit. So Revit is a very architectural heavy type of program, so used in the construction industry actually a lot, and they will use like a 3D representation. And so there are things that can be generated in AutoCAD and brought into that program as well. So visualization is just that. They're trying to create a visual representation in a 3D style. And if you look at the cube on the top right-hand corner, this is your view cube. If you left click on it and drag it around, it will actually give you the different views. You can also just click on top, for example, click on the different compass orientations, so north, east, southwest, which is your front, your side views, and your top. And to actually zoom into the building, you quite literally scroll your mouse wheel until you pass through the brick. Now, it's a little earlier today, but I think we're going to end it there as far as teaching anything new. If you guys want to play around with this some more, feel free. I'm gonna again review everything that you guys need to get ready for the certification, and make sure that we haven't missed any aspects of the commands we've already learned. Just want to make sure that we have actually covered them with enough depth and detail, and then we will at some point come up with a prep for you guys to actually go through like a mock certification. So we'll figure out when that's going to happen. And again, if there's anything you have that you want to have covered based on your discipline and how it can be applied in AutoCAD, we do need some examples, just because most of the material I have is very generic to AutoCAD, but also still a little bit more biased towards mechanical and some civil structures, just because that's sort of the background I have, and some architectural work. So I can actually bring in some architectural files as well, and kind of give you guys a look of that. We did a little bit of that when we were doing our building, technically. Those really simple roof panels, that is scraping the surface of what architectural is done in AutoCAD. So we'll go a little bit more in depth with examples like that. And yeah, that's sort of where we're at. Any questions, guys? So again, yeah, if there's things you don't feel comfortable with, bring that up, because happy to go in a little more depth or just review. Because there's some things we touched on, pretty early in the course, because we're already into week 6. Yeah, I think we're into week 6 now already. So we covered quite a bit of ground. Some stuff might have been quite a while now since we've really played around with it quite a bit. So not a bad time for review as we wrap up the latter half of this course. All right. Okay. That's all for today, guys. Thanks.